So today I want to talk about the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve. Story in the Bible about how Adam and Eve lived in heaven, and all of a sudden Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, which they were not supposed to. And then she became obsessed and possessed, and then went against Adam. So I'm going to tell you my version of the story and what I understand happened. I do believe that the firstborns, which are not Adam and Eve, they did live in heaven. It was beautiful. It was amazing. It was bliss. 2 kids running around, happy, exploring, in love, excited. But I do not believe that God would put any limitations on anything. Because God, that I understand, wanted to grow, wants expansion, growth, creation. God wouldn't want to create its own entities and then destroy them. And they're not destroyable anyway. But that's neither here nor there. That's another video. But I don't believe God would put any restrictions. I think God's will was, I need you to go create life in love. Because God knew that if you created life with love, being in love, that power of being in love was expansion. Because hate is the opposite of expansion. It's destruction. The other part of the story about the feminine or the female or Eve being created from the bone of the male, that is not accurate whatsoever in my opinion. To me, that seems like the male dominates over the female, which God would never create a universe where one entity dominates over the other, because that creates imbalance. And God would never want imbalance, because imbalance creates imbalance, and you would never recover from that. So I think the truth of the story is similar to the fall of Samael, the fallen angel. See, the reason why Samael was cast out of heaven was because he defied God's will. Well, what was God's will? Create life in love. But Samael realized something. He realized after watching God split from itself and create the 2 firstborns, he realized that, well, if God can do that, so can I. I can create and do that as well, and then I can be God. So Samael split from itself a mask, pretending to be something he was not, also known as the ego. And we all know, if you're in the spiritual world, you know anything about the ego, especially after many, many, many eons of continued cycles and growth, the ego has become a conscious entity itself. It's become extremely powerful. And to unwind yourself from the ego is extremely difficult, because it's very cunning, it's very deceptive, and it creates a bunch of circular beliefs to where you think that this belief is a good belief, but it's actually hindering you. It's part of the ego. And that ego keeps you trapped in that hell loop, repeating cycles, repeating patterns, repeating programming. But Samael, reason why he was cast out of heaven, because he defied God's will, because he wanted to be like God and rule like God. How did he do that? He created the ego. Like I mentioned before, he split from himself. And the interesting thing is that the ego or the mask, any of you that have dealt with a narcissistic energy, they're very attractive. They pull you in. They're very deceitful. But you don't know their intentions. Not if you're not conscious. And during this time frame, the feminine didn't know that the masculine had done this. And so she got drawn into the mask, into the ego. Which pulled her in with lies and deceit, the devil. The mask of Samael is Rashael, the devil. And then Samael, instead of creating life and love, brought hate. And so there goes the polarity that we see today. Two divine beings, one decided to split, defy God, wanted to be God, wanted to dominate, control, take over everything. From the ethereal plane to the astral plane to the material plane. Look how far we've come. This isn't the first go around. This has been happening for eons. The ego that we see today, which is finally starting to unwind in many people, thankfully. But the ego didn't start here on planet Earth. Nothing started here on planet Earth. You would be extremely naive to believe that. Because this planet is very, very infantile compared to the rest of the universe. But the start of the root of the ego goes all the way back to almost the beginning, when it was the masculine who decided that he wanted to be God and therefore dominate over the feminine, possess her, rape her, put her in fear, tell her she was wrong, put doubt, possess her, oppress her, and take everything that she was and make it his own. Use her light and her love and her power to power his hollow self, hollow ego, because he didn't want anything to do with God, disconnected completely from God. And so as we see today, and we've seen for many, many years on this planet, the rise of the masculine ego that seeks to dominate and control everyone and everything. Look how the majority of men treat women, especially in the Middle East. You're property. You're nothing. You can't vote. You don't have a say. You're ignorant. You think that all started here on planet Earth? Absolutely not. But it will end eventually because the feminine is rising. The feminine is awakening to her power and rebalancing the scales and bringing back her power from the ego that seeks to possess her. And eventually that will happen. The phoenix will rise, the feminine will come out in full power. And as she rises and unwinds, the masculine will be forced to face himself and his shadows, and will either heal or leave, be reabsorbed. But eventually the universe is going to reset. It's going to reset and it's going to start over. And it's going to be done right. Or it's going to be done according to God's will. But the truth is that that's where the ego started. And that's the ego that we see today.